and I had the pleasure of flying this aeroplane for 3 years. That's unusual for an RAF pilot because the RAF never bought the Starfighter. But I'll tell you about that when I come to it. The other script I had, and I was in two minds which to draw on, is about military diplomacy. Is there such a thing? Well, in a way, yes, because from time to time military officers are appointed to work with the foreign and Commonwealth office, and they become air or naval or military attaches. But we're not doing the attaché work tonight. And you ought to hear about that another time. Indeed, the 3 years I had flying the Starfighter, and the 6 years I had with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, 3 in Malaysia, and later on another 3 in India, are in a curious way connected. Because if you serve for somebody else, if you're actually working for someone who isn't the Royal Air Force, you are put on what is called the Special Duties List. Well, that sounds very exciting and exotic. It's got a hint of James Bond about it. But in fact, the Special Duties List is a list of officers who are not for the moment working for the RAF, but are still paid by the RAF, and they're still on the Royal Air Force list of current officers. Well, how did I get to be on this rather esoteric list? In the beginning, I was not a volunteer for the RAF. I was actually conscripted. A buff HMS envelope plopped through the letterbox, and the contents were quite threatening. I was told if I didn't appear at Royal Air Force Cardington near Bedford on a certain day, then 4 gentlemen with rifles would arrive and help to persuade me to go there. And that's how I joined the RAF. I don't know if you remember national service, we were paid 24 shillings a week and given a hairy uniform and told to get on with it. However, I rather liked the look of the Air Force. I flew a little bit and I liked that. And I, in the fullness of time, bluffed my way onto a pilot's course. Now, during basic flying training, there is a heavy rate of losses in training. We lost 44% of our basic students on my course through training failures, and that is not counting the gentleman who was killed flying at night. But at the end of basic training, I was faced with the opportunity to express my preference to be trained on the one hand on jets, on the old de Havilland Vampire, which you might remember flying from Valley in the early 1960s. They crashed 51 Vampires in this area, I should say, all from Valley. Or you could volunteer for the big twin-engine Varsity, which also later flew from Valley. If you flew jets, the chances were that you would be sent to be a co-pilot on the B-Force, to fly the 4-engine jet bombers, which were the center of the nuclear deterrent. Well, I didn't want that, because during national service I served on a bomber base, and I saw the rotten life that a co-pilot has. I wouldn't be a co-pilot on bombers for anything. The captain seats were full of ex-wartime people who were covered in medal ribbons. They had thousands of 4-engine hours flying, and they weren't going to be pushed out of the captain's seat by a whippersnapper of a young co-pilot. Also, they didn't fly that much. They only flew about 3 times a month, you know. So I volunteered for the heavies, which would have taken me to Transport Command, Coastal Command. And I was quickly taken aside by my instructor and told I'd volunteered for the wrong thing. It was a very democratic outfit, you know, the Air Force, and I didn't fly jets. I was not to know that I had already had the black spot put on me, and they decided that I was the right material, whatever that is, to become a flying instructor. So I came out of flying training, did the flying instructor's course, and I was rather like the poacher turned gamekeeper when I became a flying instructor on the de Havilland Vampire. We had several flying schools flying the Vampire, and I had a look at them: Syerston, Cranwell, Oakington, and a curious place I'd never heard of and never been to, called Valley. So I looked up its latitude and longitude and got a map out, and I saw it was on the coastline with mountains behind it, And I thought that looks pretty nice, and I arrived at RAF Valley in 1962 as a young flying instructor. Those of you who are old enough, those few of you who are old enough to remember 1962, will remember it was a beautiful summer. Valley was marvellous. It was wall-to-wall girls for a start in Anglesey. And there I was, teaching people to fly. I enjoyed that job. I had reasonable success. Most of the flying students I had went on to full careers in the Air Force. 4 of them became air marshals, 3 of whom were knighted. One of them still holds the RAF record for being court-martialed 3 times in 3 years. He's an airline captain now. One of them came to hold the RAF record for pre-dinner sherry drinking. If there was a formal dinner in an officer's mess, in those days they served sherry before dinner. And the nice ladies would have silver trays, and you could have dry sherry or sweet sherry, but sherry was it. And this particular officer determined, he found out that the average fella had 2 glasses of sherry before dinner. But you weren't charged by the glass. They worked out how much sherry had been drunk, and they divided it by everybody. So if you drank more than 2 glasses, you were making a profit. His record was 20 glasses of sherry in half an hour before dinner. And he lasted as long as a soup course. Oh my gosh. Was carried out. I saw his attempt just before he retired to join airlines. He's an airline captain now too. And he didn't make it. He arrived exactly 30 minutes before, got the girl with the tray of 1, 2, good evening, sir, the senior officer. He got the 20th down just as he went into dinner, and he lasted until the pudding course that time before he slid below the table and was carried out. But after my instructional tour, I went to fly fighters. I could have volunteered to fly the Hawker Hunter or the English Electric Lightning. And we all, to some degree, are self-interested. I looked at both jobs. I thought, well, I'd flown the Hunter a little, and it was a beautiful aeroplane. It was mainly used on the low-level fighter bomber, rolled by then. The majority of the squadrons were overseas. We forget how things were in the early 1960s. We had RAF squadrons of this sort in Germany, Bahrain, Aden, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Kenya. So the probability was I go overseas. And sure enough, I was posted to Hong Kong on number 28, bachelor, posted to Hong Kong, flying fighters. Wow, I thought. I was given a couple of days off to go and see my parents, say goodbye, pack my cases. And when I